All right, we're live here on this beautiful Sunday morning or afternoon, wherever you live. I'm Adam Johnson, editor of 2ways10days.com. Got some housekeeping to do. First and foremost, it's going to be a great show today. It's going to be extended. We're going to take a deep dive into AmeriLeague, and if you have your questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as well. We've got a couple interviews coming up as well. Joe Connelly III, who was going to be head coach of the AmeriLeague. He'll be joining us, as well as Mattioli, who helped break the story originally in Sporting News. So great perspectives from both sides, from the media side and from the inside as well. We did, in fact, have, and I'm not familiar with that, but yes, what was the AmeriLeague? Monte World Peace. Great question. So the AmeriLeague was started up in 2015. We're going to get into that mostly, but it was essentially a long con by a man known as Glennon Alexander, who went by the name Cerruti Brown, promised big paychecks for McDonald's All-Americans, sort of like the predecessor to the G League prospect contracts they have now. Wanted to be the alternative to one and done for college kids who didn't want to, or NBA prospects who didn't want to go to college, and they're going to be based out of Las Vegas. A lot of promises made, a lot of shrouded in secrecy, but the man at the helm, Cerruti Brown. So we're going to kind of dive into that, so to speak. It's going to be a long show, but I'm in it for the long haul. We're going to have a good time. Now, I will say, I did have booked the former president of the AmeriLeague, Jonathan Jordan, for this show. I've got it in the DMs. We slid into each other's DMs, confirmed it. I posted on Twitter he was going to do it. And it's fitting, but about 45 minutes after I tweeted that, he said, you know what, I've been advised I can't do this. So put me on a limb there, unfortunately. Would have been a great perspective to have of his. He said originally he couldn't talk because he was on a one-year NDA, apparently, with his contract with AmeriLeague. Not sure how that works, considering the league was an entire sham. But, got to respect that. But I'm surprised, yet not surprised, that he kind of backed out the last minute. But we'll get to that later. So we're going to dive deep right now into AmeriLeague. And if you go to their website now, this is what you see. This is still up. In fact, you can go there right now, AmeriLeague.com, and pull this up. Duped by Cerruti Brown, a.k.a. Glennon Alexander, the AmeriLeague is no more. So you got to dive deep in here. They had tryouts at some point. You can see the dates here. They were into signing. So originally, with Glennon Alexander, Cerruti Brown, his idea was to sign McDonald's All-Americans. He promised to sign 5 his first year. Didn't get a single one, obviously. So he sort of pivoted from there and brought in former NBA players. So there's David Harrison, Royce White, Josh Selby, to name a few. Terrence Williams, I believe, was supposedly signed. So you see all these NBA veterans, sort of like, it's a combo of the G League contract and what the Big Three is now, right? So this is kind of what it was. They're going to be based out of Las Vegas. They're apparently going to play against FIBA international teams. This is going to be a 3-month season, promising contracts of $200,000 for 3 months of work. It sounds too good to be true. Probably is, and that was the case here. But we can dive deep into that as well. If I'm missing anything, or if you have questions along the way, feel free to stop me as well. It's fascinating to me that it was led to go this long. So Cerruti Brown, just kind of background, was Glennon Alexander, but whenever he spoke to the media, he used the Cerruti Brown pseudonym, and he had no online footprint. He didn't have a Facebook, he didn't have a Twitter, no LinkedIn profile, no Snapchat, no Instagram. There was nothing you could link to this guy. And so that was part of the mystery as well, so to speak. And his idea was that he had investors that were backed but didn't want to put themselves forward until the league was seen as a success, which is backwards, right? If you have sweat equity built up, you put your name out there to provide it credibility. So that should have been the red flag number one for most people. I must stress, I was fascinated with this story because of its ties to the D-League. Is this going to be an alternative to the D-League when salaries were $13,000, $19,000, and $25,500 back then in 2015? So that was what piqued my curiosity, so to speak. Is this something that's viable? What's it all about? And anything to positively disrupt the status quo was good in my book at that point. If this is viable, and I had my doubts, but could it provide an option for the G League to perhaps increase their salaries? If this place domestically that doesn't have the backing of the NBA can do it and provide these facilities and bring in these NBA players, why can't the NBA do it? That was kind of my angle going into this, so to speak. So, and we could play. I mean, you can go to YouTube now, and there's a Las Vegas Dealers promo. We can play it here shortly. Uploaded by Rudy Brown, May 11th, 2015. He's got 3 subscribers. Why don't we give him one more? Why don't we give him one more right now? Boom. Not it's going to change anything. But if he does have this link to his phone or email right now, he just got a notification that he got a new subscriber. So, good on him. Okay. Let's check this out. This is sort of the first deal with the Las Vegas Dealers. One of the originally 8 teams to play in the AmeriLeague, down to 6 when they plan to tip off. But let's check this out.
Las Vegas, are you ready to rumble?
No.
The wait is over. Finally, a professional basketball team has chosen Vegas as their home. The Las Vegas Dealers roster will be stacked with professional talent featuring highly touted prep and collegiate players. Join the Dealers this season as they face the top FIBA and EuroLeague teams at the Cox Pavilion. Dealers games are sure to provide a family-friendly environment stacked with lots of exciting activities to participate in.
Pause it. Take a look at that logo. Does that look familiar at all? Does it look familiar at all to it? We're going to pull up this old logo here. If we can pull it up. Look at that. Whoop. No, that's not what I wanted. Right here. Look at that. Just literally just ripped it from the internet and just changed the colors. The same thing. Fascinating, isn't it? So we'll come over here now. Finish it up.
Let's support our Dealers in their inaugural season starting in October. The time is now, City of Las Vegas. The wait is over. Join our team. As you know, the house always wins.
The house always wins. You can see here a little maybe in-arena promo here as well. Basic graphics artwork there. Some of the first footprints for this organization online. And I believe Rudy Brown originally did a phone interview with Fox 5 News, but one of the few people, and we'll talk to her later, that actually spoke to Rudy Brown was Cami Mattioli of Sporting News. She got the scoop, and it's really fascinating to kind of see here. Las Vegas Dealers, a proposed semi-pro team. So originally it was the one team. They decided to do the whole league. His prospective squad would pay up to $700,000 to poach McDonald's All-American players and the top college and free agent talents. So, I mean, that's crazy, right? To come out of nowhere and disrupt the status quo. Sounds too good to be true, like I mentioned before. But again, Mattioli says here there's no record of a Rudy Brown LinkedIn, no YouTube videos, no Facebook, not a tweet to be found. In 2015 even, that seems unheard of. You know, you have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have something to establish an online footprint, so to speak. To suggest he doesn't have one, there's a reason for that. It's by design. No comment on that, he told Sporting News on Monday with a hearty chuckle. So obviously, something's up, something's amiss. Mattioli says he said he was a businessman who made his living thinking outside the box. So we want to know, what did you do? What should lend credibility to this if you are who you say you are? So, she says there's nothing about him, and that he said his successes were in other fields outside of sports, and involved him, quote, just coming up with an idea and having other companies employ him and his small little staff to think outside the box and generate more revenue. He just comes in, pitches an idea, and it makes money. Listen, I got ideas for days. I'm going to make you some money. Boom! It's free real estate. A domain search of the dealer's website created April 25th returns domain ownership by a proxy website. So basically, he's trying to hide anything. When you sign up for a domain name or create a website, you got to put your personal information there, or you can pay extra money to remain anonymous, and that's exactly what he did here. But there's all kinds of questions. And he hired Scott Adobato to coach one team, along with Joe Connelly, who we'll bring on as well in a bit. Here's the big thing, too. When we physically open up shop in 2 weeks in Vegas, we actually are already going to have $10 million to play with. Gone is the press release announcing the team's creation. It's placed a YouTube video and a countdown clock, but what it counts down to is not disclosed. Through Brown's venture is only a few weeks old, he told Sporting News that the plans to have a major shoe company involved in sponsoring. So he's saying all these things. Why would a shoe company want to sponsor something like this? If you look at the underlining of everything, there's shoe companies fighting over just kids just for a travel and AAU team. With that in mind, shoe companies are spending tens of millions of dollars individually to fund a program to push shoes and make sure the top teams wear them. If I'm a shoe exec, I would want, if possible, to have 8 or 10 of the top 25 guys on one team. I see no difference of what I'm doing than that of a regular high major program, except high major programs, you know who's running the show. We don't know who you are, unfortunately. So he's trying to, blow smoke up there and say he's getting this and that. He's got promises, nothing in writing, obviously. Where'd the money come from? All walks of life. We have athletes. It's a big population of people out there who take business risks. Sports is a billion-dollar business. The average person would say it can't be done because they're limited on the funds they have. But someone that has taken risks and has generated revenue, tens of millions for himself or herself, they had to take risks. Okay, so doesn't say who. Doesn't say where it came from. Just people that took risks, right? But with that risk, you put yourself out there. So again, whole lot of nothing. I kind of figured something like this would be big, and I wouldn't start it and go public unless I already knew and talked to prospects as far as playing for the team and already had the funding, he said. There's quite a few NBA superstars that I've talked to, their advisors, and they think it's a great idea because everybody deserves options to make a living. On paper, sure, that's a good idea, but you got to put your money where your mouth is, right? Who's not going to say no to $200,000 in 3 months of work, right? Who's going to say no to that? And who's going to say no to not traveling either? If you're just in Vegas for 3 months, that's even more beneficial for you if the teams come to you. So, yes, on paper, yes, options are a good thing, but having a viable option is a totally different thing, right? Brown declined to name any NBA players or the advisors with whom he has said he's spoken. We know later he did sign players to AmeriLeague contracts. Part of the money, Brown says, is earmarked for paying to land opponents and a home venue. They've talked to the Thomas and Mack Center, the same place where the NBA holds summer league games. Dealers had indeed reached out, so they did reach out, but there was no contract or formal agreement in place, according to this article here. One of the dealers' confirmed opponents is EuroLeague member CSK Moscow. No confirmation there, so according, Mattioli does her due diligence here and reaches out to all these outlets that he throws out there. By emphasizing the unique station of money, he says, everybody's situation is different. We go in and talk to a parent. That's the first thing that's on our minds. Secondly, we really hit home to a parent and tell them this is not a one-year deal. Yes, there are talks that your son is going to be a one-and-done player, but we're offering a multi-year contract. If next year's not the time, then next year's not the time. You're the option for one and done. It is 1 year. That's what you're pitching. You're not going to be able to pay more than the NBA. So it's problematic, certainly. Yeah, they'll offer a multi-year deal, but the deal will be voided if a player opts to declare for the draft after one season. Okay, that's fine. There's plenty more here as well. Yeah, it's pretty just because SNY's Adam Zagoria reached out to several McDonald's All-Americans, most of whom said they'd never heard of Brown's proposition. So, according to this, none of them even knew who he was. So that indeed becomes true. Brown will be poaching players from the likes of Kentucky or Duke or Arizona, but that's not an issue in his mind for one reason. Those kids aren't buying into the coach or the school, he argues. They're buying into the notion of being successful at the next level. Sure. But I think there's, some coaches are better at preparing players for the NBA. So there is some loyalty there, so to speak. And you take a look here. She even does the research on the business license. Even though they're based out of Las Vegas, their business license is in the state of Delaware. You can't make this up. And then as of this publication, the Nevada State Secretary of State website has no record of any business filings under the name LV Basketball Enterprises, Inc. Similar search of California's Secretary of State Business Index also returned no results. Curious given that Fox 5 article attributes Brown as part of a, quote, California-based group behind the creation of the dealers. You can't keep a story straight. Brown said he wants to spell that rumor, telling Sporting News he's actually based out of Florida. Okay, so wait. Okay, so we've got license in Delaware. They're based out of Vegas. California-based group. And now we're in Florida. So we're bouncing back. That's 4 different locations if you're trying to keep up. That's not to say the business is operating illegally, at least not yet. The dealers can very well have to apply for a foreign status and be licensed to conduct business in any of these states. There's no record of these filings, though. Is this going to happen? Will it work and won't it be a fly-by-night operation? I want the team to be a mainstay and open people's eyes and hopefully make the right changes through the NCAA. He doesn't even know if it's going to work. Kind of fascinating when you're trying to put this off the ground and you don't even know if it's going to work. Why should anyone believe in you if you don't know it's going to work? Okay. So my good old buddy, Chris Reichert, originally this was, now it's a step back, originally Upside Motor, I believe. Him and I were on the same wavelength at this point. We kind of conversed back and forth before we pitched our own articles. Mine at D-League Digest. And he had requested interview a couple times, got nowhere. I happened to email and they responded to mine. So Chris's article happened to come out first, and he kind of questions everything too. Good reporting from him for as best as he could without the outlets. He kind of recaps Ken Mattioli's story. And then, he talks to agents. Some people are saying this is no good. This is not going to happen. Quota will fold before it starts. Another prominent agent responded, from what I understand, Surrey Brown has already had issues with investors. When UNM asked if he would have any of his players sign there, considering all the money being thrown around, he said, I would not. I'm highly skeptical. Now, I understand these are just 2 opinions, but the stigma surrounding the league when you talk to basketball people is that it's not kosher. Right? Something's up, right? Seems too good to be true. I feel like that's a running theme. Of course. The league has a long way to go before it can be sustainable, let alone challenge the NBA D-League for minor league supremacy. My only hope is that these players get their checks before it all goes up in smoke. Well, didn't exactly happen, unfortunately, that way. Okay. So, where does this bring us? So, for me, I think this came out on a Monday. I think my interview was scheduled for Tuesday with Jonathan Jordan. And it's fitting because I had emailed the general, there was a PR email, and I had asked him to talk to the president. And they got back to me, no problem, we'll set it up for Tuesday. I think it was at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m., one of those 2, I think. I'm like, great, that's awesome. And I was looking forward to it, I had some questions to ask, and really wanted to dig deep. Not a lot of people had, been able to crack the shell that was AmeriLeague at that point. So I was eager to learn more. And like I said, I wanted to disrupt the status quo. I wanted to see what they could do. And that was it for me, right? So I go to my local coffee shop. They don't pay me, so they don't need to get free advertising here. I'll set up my laptop, got my questions ready to go. And anyone that's done a phone interview knows, it's not expected to start exactly on time, right? So 5 minutes go by, nothing. 10 minutes go by, nothing. 15 minutes go by, nothing. That's when you kind of, about the 15-minute mark is usually either you hear from them or you kind of check in. Hey, we're going to make sure that you remembered this interview, right? So I didn't have his number at the time. He had mine. And I emailed him back from his personal email that was on the website. I said, hey, I just want to make sure we're still up for this. It was about 20 minutes after the top of the hour. And right immediately, I got an automatic generated email saying that Jonathan Jordan is no longer the president of the AmeriLeague. And that's when this whole thing started, right? It hadn't been reported yet by any outlet. And at that point, that's when things started to hit the wall. So I was prepared to do this interview and write the story in the morning. So my whole thing changed. I started digging deep. I started trying to figure out what was going on. And that's when things really started to snowball. Jonathan Jordan hadn't been... He was president, but he wasn't anymore. So, and this was also, you got to remember, this is like 2 or 3 days before their draft that they're supposed to have. And by the way, there's no draft rules on their board. There's no list of available players at this point. And so you got to believe this is not really a viable operation at that point, but you got to do your due diligence. You got to know what's going to happen. So you got to reach out accordingly. Now, this is the AmeriLeague Twitter. I just want to point this out real quick. So there's talking about tryouts here. And I think they charge like $250 to $275 a tryout, which is ridiculous. Most G League teams charge $100 to $150 in perspective. So say, good morning, everyone. 2 more days until Dallas tryouts. Not too late to register on the website. The very next day, due to unexpected increase in tryout registration, we have rescheduled the Dallas tryout for Friday, October 9th. So this here should have been a red flag at some point because, number one, why are you not capping your tryouts? Number 2, why do you need to reschedule it? Are you going to a new venue? You haven't described if it's a new venue you need or what the issue was specifically. If you have an increase, that's what you want, but you need to know how many you can hold at certain times. So obviously, they got maybe 1 or 2 tryouts, and that was it. So they want to extend it to try out at a later time to get more people signed up. That's clearly what it is. But they kind of just hide behind that. We got so many. We're in demand. We need to push this back because we didn't plan accordingly to be overwhelmed by people that want to play in the AmeriLeague. So, and it's a shame, really, when you think about it. So here's this. Mark Spears, shout out to Mark Spears for the D-League Digest attribution. And one agent said the AmeriLeague has yet to play any of the former NBA players signed. And we, of course, this was at 10:16. So just like I said, it was at my interview was at 10 o'clock. I remember this now. And at 10:15 is when I tweeted out he had resigned. And right there, boom. Shout out to Mark Spears, of course. So that was when things started really cooking, so to speak, for this thing. So it was very interesting, to say the least. And so this was kind of my first story. I did 3 parts on this. And so this was more of the first story to kind of break it. So I go into why I wanted to see this league take place. Offering contracts upwards of $2.5 million is what he originally said. According to an interview with Alex Kennedy of Basketball Insiders in August. So Brown failed to secure any after suggesting an interview with Fox 5 News he would land at least 5. Brown has no online footprint, a shabby, hastily made LinkedIn profile, minimal Facebook presence, no Twitter, nothing. Doesn't offer any of his financial offerings. Redundant there. Only mentioning in May he had $10 million from 3 financial backers in an interview with Adam Zagori of SNY. And Jeff Goodman, we talked about here, they said they had signed Terrence Williams, Josh Selby, David Harrison, Royce White. But little else is known about him. And this is that point where I had his phone number, supposedly, after talking to some agents. One of them was kind enough to give it to me. Did a Spokeo search on the number. I reached out to it's registered LV dealers, and that's it. I tried calling him. No answer. And this was the email I got. I resigned from my position with AmeriLeague. Please refer all queries to him. So then I did get his number from someone else, from I believe another agent or player that signed in. Sorry, I can't talk specifics. Good luck with your website, is all he wrote. There's no information, though. The season begins in 20 days from when I posted this. No sponsors, no game schedules, no rules, nothing. There's nothing on this site. Numerous press releases mention tickets are on sale, yet the link on the homepage only mentions they will be available soon. So another contradiction. We watched this video earlier. Tree Rollins was one of the head coaches that was going to take place in this league. Again, no eligible players to be drafted, draft order, or rules listed anywhere. Some of their logos, we talked about that. Looks exactly like the Iowa Energy. And then talking to agents, there's not a chance to let any of my clients sign with that league. It's too good to be true. AmeriLeague needs to build up its own credibility before we put our own on the line, the second agent representative said. I spoke to Zach Charles, who represents a number of players, including David Harrison. So they're doing their due diligence once they wrote that, once Jordan resigned. And then more about Mattioli, kind of recapping that as well. So the Jonathan Jordan resignation was pretty tough. Very interesting to say the least, though. So we're going to bring on Joe Connelly III in a moment. We'll be right back, though. Joining us now on this episode is Joe Connelly III, who is kind enough to grace us today. Joe, former, you're chuckling. It's quite interesting to say the least, this whole ordeal with AmeriLeague. You were signed up as an assistant coach, head coach. You were originally a Wizards developmental coach or an assistant with the Washington Wizards. Can you kind of tell me your background on this experience with AmeriLeague and how this sort of opportunity came about for you?
good situation where we could, make a nice chunk of change in a short period of time, continue to do what I love to do in coaching and, just experience a new situation out there in Las Vegas. So the allure of it was pretty, it was a perfect situation for me at that time. And it's something that we were excited about. And obviously it didn't come to fruition, but, the initial burst of interest and, the appeal of the league was very tempting.
So the question is for me is who reached out to you initially? Was that a member of the front office? Did you get a call from Cerruti Brown out of the blue? How did that process come about where you obviously were interested but then became fully engaged with AmeriLeague, so to speak?
Yeah. So pretty much I write about the league and, I've leagues like this always hold some level of appeal to me in terms of just the newness of it, the uniqueness of the situation and that type of thing. So I believe I actually emailed, they had a press release and I emailed whatever the email address was, the contact. I just emailed that, just sent my resume over on a whim, just in the event that it turned out to be a successful venture. And right away, Cerruti, I don't know how to refer to him, man, but the guy that was in charge of it emailed me back, told me, what they were offering the coaches. And, right away it was pretty much sort of like a wham bam type of thing. It wasn't really much of a vetting out process or anything, but, I guess having MBA on the resume sort of helped him and, give a little credibility, so to speak. So just it wasn't really any interview process or vetting. Just a couple emails were exchanged and, it just took a life from there.
Did that concern you at all that there was no vetting process or that, it was almost too easy to have applied and be hired for the AmeriLeague? Can you give me a timeline, too, from when you emailed them to when you were hired on, essentially, as well?
Sure. Don't really remember, specific time frame, but it wasn't arduous process or, it wasn't a long, and it didn't really concern me because they were moving at breakneck speed, signing players and, getting where they were going, and sort of been around some of these things before. A lot of times it's, they're flying by the seats of their pants and that type of thing. So it didn't really concern me. In retrospect, obviously it should have raised some red flags, but at the time, probably I was looking at through rose-colored glasses because, it was a situation that was beneficial to my family and I at the time. But in retrospect, I probably should have scrutinized it a little closer.
And at what point for you was the red flags start to go off? I know, you were in a position with your family. You had young kids at the time. You kind of mentioned it seemed like it was the right fit for you. But at what point did the red flags start going off for you?
Oh man, it was literally the day before we were supposed to leave. I bought tickets on Southwest. They were supposed to be reimbursed. We were supposed to have housing when we got out there. So, almost a day before that we were supposed to leave, somebody that's connected, to the situation somehow, gave me a call, almost to give me a heads up, man, you might want to check the situation out. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, sometimes people aren't what they pretend to be and that type of thing. So right away, it was a person I trusted. And so right away when I heard that, I was like, oh, whatever. I just felt some a feeling of my body got hot, oh man, don't tell me that. So it's funny because I have one of my best friends, Brian Moore, who lives in Las Vegas. He actually met up with this guy. So, he sent me a picture. When I got the picture of the guy, I sent it to my buddy, and, it turned out to be the same guy. And, like I said, my heart sank. Had the plane tickets, so we still went out to Las Vegas. We went out there and, made the best of it because we had the tickets were non-refundable and that type of thing. So we were out there and, just, trying to make the best of a bad situation. But definitely was a monkey wrench in the program, for my personal endeavors. But, it was that quick, we're packed up, we're ready to go, get the call that this is the strange thing, this really strange, there used to be this basketball camp in New Jersey this guy named Rich Marcucci had an outdoor basketball camp, and like from Kobe Bryant, Stephon Marbury, like he had all the top players at different times came through and played at this outdoor camp, like, and Cerruti was Glendon Alexander in his former life, and Glendon Alexander went to that camp that I worked as a freshman, phenom. So like, it's just odd how it sort of like came full circle from that time to what it eventually turned out to be, and just find it unfortunate that it worked out the way it did, because he had a level of intelligence, he had a vision, but at the end of the day, it just turned out all to be a scam.
Yeah, a pretty big scam. So you still flew out to Vegas. When you say we, can you share who you went with? Was it? I know you mentioned before.
Sure,
you had,
it was my wife and my 3 kids. Like we took
wow.
We had homeschool, but like it's funny how like the world works. So we're out there in Las Vegas, and I'm pretty, like I'm keeping it cool, but I'm like, damn, like this is a bad situation. And literally while we were in Vegas, I got a random call from an associate, Tim Hudson, in Australia. And at that time, like, he didn't know anything about the AmeriLeague, but he called to offer me a coaching job in Australia. So we went from being in Las Vegas to, getting a call to go to Australia, to Sydney, Australia, to coach in the NBL, which is, one of the premier leagues in the world. And, it's one of those things where sometimes like doors close for different reasons, and it just opened. Had I had that league happen, or had it the timing never been differently, I would have probably not taken advantage of the opportunity. But it turned out to be one of the best situations in my life. Like I had the chance to go to Australia, taking the kids there. I became the head coach during the season. So just sometimes like bad things happen for good reasons. So, like in my case, it sort of fell into place, but, still to this day, even talking about it, brings back some emotions that weren't really especially pleasant at the time.
I'm sure, but it offers an opportunity to reflect and learn and grow from it, I suppose. While you were in Vegas, did you track down the AmeriLeague office and go bang down doors and try and find Cerruti Brown, or did you just kind of avoid the whole situation at that point? What was your thoughts in Vegas? Yeah.
Well, in Vegas, it was before I even went to Vegas, and because you have to think, like when I took the job, like Woj tweeted out like the AmeriLeague gained some credibility hiring former Wizards assistant coach Joe Connelly. So
right.
I looked at it in a way where it's like somewhat, I don't want to say embarrassed, but like it was like the one thing. Got into this basketball life, I was a school teacher in Baltimore City, and always did the grassroots coaching, and so my whole MO was like helping people achieve their dreams. And this thing turned out to be like a thing where this guy was selling dreams. Like I had my whole roster signed. I had guys like professional players from the Baltimore D.C. area. I had a 6'10" shooting guard coming from Puerto Rico. I had guys like the contracts went out, they were signed. I had my roster done. Like it was like everything was in order, like it was just like one of those things where just as bad, like, as I wanted to feel for myself, there was a lot of guys who passed up European opportunities, G League opportunities to, pursue this opportunity that never came to fruition, that I felt way worse for them than I did for myself, because like, in a way, he used me to perpetrate the fraud and, sell this dream on to other people as well. So, I felt, like, not that I was complicit with it in any way, because obviously I didn't know what was going on, but, like they got screwed over worse than me, at the end of the day.
Right, it's your reputation on the line, and I mean, you're lucky to find, footing relatively quickly. It's players, though, that don't get those same opportunities, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yep, I agree with that.
Yeah, so, I mean, you move on to Sydney, but, I mean, looking back, if you had anything to say to Cerruti Brown / Glendon Alexander, would you have any words for him, or if there's anything that maybe give you kind of closure or anything on this?
Oh, I like literally like not to sound over dramatic, but within my family, like this, life itself throws you a bunch of curveballs. So like for whatever reason, I did the TBT thing, and we lost in the semifinals a couple years in that. So like that's emotion. Like just like in life, you take the hits and keep it moving. So literally, like the day the closure came for me was the day I found out it wasn't happening. So like there wasn't any reason for me to track him down or dwell on it or to try to beat him up or any of that.
I'm not suggesting physical. I'm not advocating for physical violence.
I know you weren't. I'm just saying in terms of like the energy I chose to put to it. Like I chalked it up as an L, and like added it to the list of losses I've taken along the way and kept it moving. So like Jonathan Jordan, who is a friend of mine who I work with closely through the process. He was the brains behind the operation. And I guess what I would say to him is that, man, like, why? I just don't get what the motivation was. Why would you sell all these dreams to people who are like, basketball is a dream-related industry. Like, it's a dream to get a scholarship. It's a dream to play professional basketball. But like, why would you sell these dreams to people? And like he impacted a lot of people's careers. And you think, like, for me, coaching and that type of thing, like, it's a much longer window for players. You're lucky to go from 23 to 30. So if you take out one season or if you pass up a European opportunity, for this, like, it really like derailed a lot of guys' careers. So like, I guess if I had a chance to ask him anything, it would just be why. Like, was it the money? Were you trying to get money and defraud people? Were you trying to feel powerful that all these people were now responding to you in the basketball community? Just disheartening. But end of the day, like I hope obviously hope he doesn't do this again. But I hope he sees that he's not a dumb guy. He had a vision. He brought this to life. So just speaks to, I guess, misguided intelligence in his case.
Fair enough. You mentioned contracts signed. Did you see any of those contracts that were signed by Alexander? Because there's questions on whether they were signed by the name Glendon Alexander or Cerruti Brown, and questions of felony forgery.
No, I never did. But Jonathan Jordan, who like I said, like, when you talk about a one-man show, like, this guy was doing everything. Like, he was doing all the contracts. He was, like it was operating as if it was really going to happen. So like, there's all the paperwork, the salary structure, like all that stuff was in place. It's not like it was like, like, there was pretty detailed in terms of the thought that was put into it and the salary scale and, where they were going to, it was pretty intricate. So I never personally saw that. I would see all the contracts. So like, say for a player I wanted to sign, I would throw his name out there and Cerruti would, sign off on it. Jonathan Jordan would execute the contract, and I would just send it to the player or their agent, and they would send it back to them. So I never really paid attention to like the sign portion from his end. So I don't want to say like I did see it,
sure.
But everything around that process was pretty official and like on par with how like it works with European clubs and minor league programs as well.
Yeah, I wanted Jonathan to come on today, but not going to happen. Not in the cards, unfortunately. So he was signed on to do this, and then 45 minutes after we agreed, said he could not. He was advised not to. So, real shame.
Like, in his defense, like, he was way more intricately involved with it. I never met the guy.
Sure.
Like I said, went out there. Like, he was physically out there in the offices. Like, I don't know, like, and also too, that guy's a lawyer, so I don't know, like, like he was complicit with it, or he could be, I don't know, made to be a party to some of these lawsuits and that type of thing. So I haven't really spoke to him too much about it since then, but I can say that he, for what he did was pretty impressive, in terms of like setting up, and he was probably the guy that Cerruti relied on the most to make it seem official, because he was cross the T's, dot the I's type of guy. It really gave you a feeling that this was a professional situation.
Wow. Any final thoughts before I let you go here about the league, your experience, or any stories? You shared quite a bit, and I really appreciate it, but if there's anything else you'd like to add before I let you go, Joe, feel free to share.
Sure. Well, first of all, like Adam, I think it's a story that needs to be told. Just watching that Fire Festival documentary that just came out, like it really reminded me a lot of this situation. Like, and you just think of like the mental state of these guys that are obviously intelligent, obviously have vision. Like, what goes on in your head to want to F people over? Like I just don't get that part of it. And like I just think it's one of those stories that like is infamous to be a part of it. You know what I mean? Like Jeff Goodman ran it. Watching it on ESPN and Woj like do articles and stuff like that. It was surreal. Like, I can't think of another word to put it in. It was just surreal to see like that. Like somehow, some way, you get caught up with it, and like, and looking back, like obviously, it wasn't the greatest thing, but it wasn't the end of the world for me either. So just another interesting, I guess, asterisk in my career thus far. So, I just hope the people, the players especially that were negatively impacted, recovered as well as they could. And, I think it's a story that, like people will still find interesting this day. So I'm curious to see the type of responses you get to, furthering this follow-up on it. So
I think it's fascinating. And this story was really where I cut my journalism teeth, so to speak. Kind of diving in and finding out Jonathan had resigned that morning of our interview to be scheduled. I have a question for you from our chat room. Monte World Peace wants to know, I think you already touched on this, but if there's anything positive that came from the AmeriLeague's semi-existence. Was there any positives to take away from this? I know you mentioned you headed to Australia, but was there anything positive that you feel came away from this league?
I can't really think of any, to tell you the truth, because like outside, like I don't think Jonathan Jordan, for all the work he put in, I don't think he ever got paid. Besides it being a great story and having the chance to talk to you and that type of thing, I can't think of any real positives that came out of it. It was it was a guy selling dreams. That's dreams are sacred. It's something I've always been very serious about. People's dreams. This guy just sold dreams. So it's a great question, but I can't off the top of my head think of anything positive that came out of it outside of, like, for myself, I came out relatively unscathed. If that's positive, I guess.
Fair enough. Well, Joe, I really appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk to us. Best of luck moving forward with you professionally and personally with your family. And thank you so much for sharing. I want to share the story with as many people as possible. Had no idea you took your family to Vegas. You'd already bought the tickets, obviously, but it's not just the people and the players; it's the families that are affected as well. So, thank you for sharing your story, and best of luck moving forward, Joe.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm sure this won't be the last time this comes up. So
no, there's
good job. I'm glad you're keeping the story alive because this could turn into a major motion picture down the road. And,
yeah, I'll have to option it with
know.
Warner Brothers or something in 10 years or so when it's forgotten about to remind people once more. So.
Hey, well, that, like I said, that Fire Festival documentary, because with the cast of characters that are involved in this, like, I think it has some legs, so any of your listeners that are aspiring filmmakers, they can reach out to you and we could be co-producers and,
all right.
To the world. But,
all right.
But yep. I definitely appreciate it, Adam. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care, Joe. Thank you.
See ya.
Yep. All right. We got Joe Connelly, fascinating as one of the head coaches. He did acknowledge that he maybe didn't do his due diligence moving forward with the league, that it might have been too good to be true, but the opportunity seemed to fit for him with his time and his family there. And I had no idea that he flew his whole family out to Vegas for this venture just a day or two. I'm assuming, and I didn't clarify on this before the draft. So, really, really fascinating stuff, to say the least. So, quite an interview from him. So let's keep moving forward if we shall. So I want to touch on one more thing here. Where is it? I got my cues up here. Here we go. So Chris and I, Chris Reichert, my best friend, my partner in crime, fellow G League savant like me, he was also tuned into this story as well, talking to agents, talking to players, doing the rounds as well. And, things happen when you're reporting, and this was one of the things. So, just got a call from a blocked number, answered, and the voice said, "Be careful what you say about AmeriLeague," and they hung up. Fascinating. I mean, not to say that I condone any threats against Chris or his family. I don't think he took it seriously, to say the least. But, I mean, this is kind of what was happening behind the scenes as well. I still remember when he texted me that had just happened to him. Literally at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on October 22nd. That's 2 days after the story broke. This is already a trash fire. This was supposed to be the day, actually, of their AmeriLeague draft, so to speak. So, it's not going to end well, especially when you're making passive threats to people. And then I got a similar call to this as well. I don't think it wasn't really in this sort of tone, but more of like, don't talk bad about the AmeriLeague. And of course, people in the AmeriLeague organization had my number. So it's fair to say that, someone gave it to him, or, they already had it. So, and then I got I got these texts from Marcus Bass, the commissioner and marketer, who is probably I know Joe said it was Jonathan Jordan was crossing the T's and dotting the I's, but Marcus Bass had his face out there more than Cerruti Brown at this point. He's a fascinating character. And we can go over, too, about the people involved, whether it's Marcus Bass, Jonathan Jordan, who I think was just out of law school at that point, so he was looking for an opportunity. Ethan Noroff, who before this was an editor at Bleacher Report. And then touching back on Bass, he was a blogger for Fanside, I think mostly for Clippers news, too. So, I mean, you kind of see these people, these individuals that are writing about basketball. They're young. They're looking to get their foot in the door in the sports world. So you see all these different things kind of aligning with the people that he took and picked as well to participate in this league. So here's mine that I got. I'll put this back here. Okay. So Chris tweeted another thing. Look at the. I want to implore you right now, if I can, if this will work. Let's see here. 3:14 a.m. is my screenshot on this. But it came at 12:45. And I was texting him, call if you'd like to chat. Marcus Bass, we're talking about, says AmeriLeague contracts are toilet paper, yet the league not a scam. Can't be both, brother. That's what Chris says. You can't be both. If they're toilet paper and it's not a scam, what is it? So then, he proceeds to tell me, do you realize when you guys put things like this out in you Jeopardy people that were simply employees? Very unfair. Some people just want to make a living and work a job. Now, I don't know if you're making a living if you're not getting paid and work a job at that point. But this negates all the players and coaches like Joe Connelly, who flew his whole family out there. You don't think about that when you're sending this text. Do you realize when you guys put things like this out, you out in jeopardy people that were simply employees? What about the players who were frauded? What about the coaches that were frauded as well? What about all the other people that were thrown up in this scam courtesy of Glendon Alexander? And I tweet back, this is fair though? Is this fair? To get a call from a blocked number? That's at 3:09 a.m. I sent that. I was so fed up. Those are your words, not mine. You chose to speak to me. I didn't force you to say or do anything. I said, do not try to pass any blame on to me for what you said to the media. We are done. Best of luck moving forward. And I think I blocked his number after that, because if he was going to text me at 12:45 in the morning, who knows what he was going to do as far as that point. So that's when I cut off communication with Marcus Bass. We can go into the Marcus Bass story in a bit, but I do want to bring on Cami Mattioli of Sporting News. I believe she is now with IMG Tennis Academy, but at this point, she was really on the forefront of this story. So I want to bring her on as well, get her perspective, and see what she has to say about what she remembers covering the story about, gosh, really 3.5, 4 years ago almost. It's going to be 4 years in May. So really fascinating. So we'll be right back. I'm going to bring her on, and we'll talk more G League, or excuse me, not G League, AmeriLeague. All right, joining us now, who was at the forefront of the AmeriLeague story back in May 2015, asked all the right questions, got all the wrong answers probably. Cami Mattioli of Sporting News, who's now in sports marketing, I believe. You were with Sporting News till 2016, a year after the story broke. Cami, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing on this Sunday?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this. I haven't thought about this story for a long time, actually. So
yeah,
it's nice to kind of go back.
I was mentioning before, this is sort of where I, broke my journalism teeth, so to speak, on kind of asking these questions and whatnot. So what my first question for you is, coming back to the Sporting News article, can you describe the process? Cerruti Brown, a.k.a. Glendon Alexander, was an enigma, so to speak, right? No one knew much about him. No one knew who he was. Were you able to just get an interview just by interviewing or emailing AmeriLeague PR and they said no problem? Can you describe how you obtained the interview if it was just that easy?
Yeah, so I remember just like when I first heard about this, I was like, the whole idea, and this was like way before this concept had even been proven in any way. Now you have Big Baller Brand and all that doing something similar. But so I remember hearing them talk about this. I think it was on I want to say like Fox 5 in LA or something, and I saw the interview and I was like, wow, that seems like he was like making a lot of claims, and it just seems like, something was too good to be true. So I sat down and I reached out through, I think it was their PR team. I don't remember exactly. It was kind of like a weird email. And so I shot an email and I said, hey, I saw this interview on Fox LA or whatever it was. And I wanted to know more. I work for Sporting News. I cover college basketball. And so they emailed back and said, okay, yeah, we'll give you a call. Which, like sometimes interviews work that way. But normally you meet through time and, you kind of set it up that way. So I'm sitting at my desk one day and I get a call from an unknown number. And normally I don't really pick those up. But So I let it go, and then they called back immediately. So I answered it, and he, you know, it was, again, from a blocked number. So I thought that was weird. And then, you know, it was Susan on the other end, and it was directly him. And you know, we're talking, and he said immediately, he's like, oh, I got to call you back. I got to call you back. I was like, okay. So I called back, supposedly. Again, I don't know because the number was blocked. And his voice sounds different, like almost like it was running it through like one of those voice transmographers or something where it kind of skews your voice a little bit. So I was like, okay, this is super weird. I've never had an interview where something like that happened. So that kind of really was what made me think twice about whether this guy was being straightforward or not.
So he comes back on with a voice like a modulator, so to speak, just one of those things.
Yeah.
You see like Unsolved Mysteries where they're draped in black and they don't want their identity to be revealed, so to speak.
Yeah, like we were in like he was like a secret witness or something. It was so strange.
I mean, what were your first impressions of Cerruti Brown from that interview? It sounds like you had a lot of questions and he sort of, you know, dodged as many as he possibly could, but what were your impressions from him?
Am I allowed to curse on here?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, there is no filter on this. You can curse. Sure.
Okay, well, I thought he was full of shit, number one, because just the way that he said things, obviously with his fake voice and all, but, you know, he was very vague, and I said, well, he's like, well, you know, I have a background in sports business, and I was like, oh, well, what were some of your other ventures? Oh, well, you know, I just made a lot of money, and everything was these bold claims and then these vague answers. And when I pressed, like constantly the subject changed. And it was all these bold claims about, you know, we don't care. Kids don't go to Kentucky because they want to play for John Calipari. They go to Kentucky because they want to go to the NBA draft. And like, so all these things that he was saying are things that in other people that I've talked to, people don't generally view things that way. And so it was just very strange to me. And the longer the conversation went on, it was almost like he was like saying these things because he needed to believe them himself. So he's kind of like hyping himself up in a way. I mean, he's clearly very passionate about what he was doing, and I guess in some sense probably truly believed that it was a model that could work, but I wasn't exactly convinced, and he wasn't exactly doing the best job to convince me of it.
Was there anything, I'm just looking at your article now, was there anything from this story that maybe didn't make it to the final cut? Was there anything left on the editing room floor that you wanted to add that didn't make it to the story?
Oh my gosh, that's like 3 years ago. I don't remember there being much. I think honestly it was just the biggest challenge was trying to weave all of these weird details into a way that made sense for the common person. So, you know, once we started looking into it further about, you know, he said his company was based in California, so we searched for business records in California and it's not there. And then all of a sudden we find that it's registered in Delaware, which is kind of like the entry point for starting an LLC. But then, you know, he says, oh, well, we're going to play at the Thomas and Mack Center at UNLV. And, you know, I call Thomas and Mack and they're like, yeah, we've heard of this guy, but we don't have any formal agreement. And then we look up to see whether his business is licensed to practice in Nevada, and it's not. So, like, all these little details of things that we just kind of went back and double and triple checked that he claimed, it was so hard to put that all into a format where we're, like, obviously calling out the fact that he's not lying about these things, and in some cases he is, but that what he's saying is not truthful, and then trying to put that in a way that makes sense where a reader could be like, oh, okay, this is really a big deal. Because, I mean, at the time it was really a big deal.
So what you're saying is it's all about the implication, right? You can't outright say it, but it's the implication behind what he is saying. You can't outright call him a liar, but you put the pieces together, there's lie after lie after lie. So quite fascinating. When did you get back into the story? I know, you know, this was in May, and then the AmeriLeague drama picked up late October. Was there any kind of correspondence between you and the AmeriLeague, or had you kept in touch, or was it just this one story and that was it?
At the time, it was just, and again, this is 3 years ago, so I'm trying to remember everything that I can, but at the time, I think, you know, obviously it was fascinating, and then we had this whole conversation with him, and then he disappeared off the face of the earth, and then I guess it was Outside the Lines came back around in association with stuff that you had written in October, and then it kind of blew the story up, and I was like, well, hold on a second, like, you guys are not the first people to come up with this. Like, I talked to this guy
Show the receipts.
I'm
Show
one of
the
people who
receipts.
actually talked to this guy.
Right. You're like, hello.
2019, the year of the receipts.
Hello, McFly. I was here in May. I told you all about this. Did you?
What's crazy to me is like after I wrote that story in May and pointed out, this is an inconsistency. This is an inconsistency. People were still taking this guy at his word, and I'm like, okay, I mean, you do you. Like it is what it is. If you want to believe him, that's fine. Maybe you have different intel than I have. Totally get it. But then like we come back around to October and his people aren't getting paid, and this draft is allegedly happening, and he's taking money from people to enter this draft, and the draft never happens, and it's just like, okay, well, the red flags were there. Whether you choose to ignore them is on you, but I mean, it's not like I didn't point out some of these things,
Sure. And after the fact, when people are signing in, coaches or players, did you reach out to them personally and say, hey, here's a link to my story back in May, you might want to check this out? Or do you, I guess a better question would be, do you feel you have a responsibility as a journalist to, when you see, people still possibly being taken advantage of, to kind of steer them in this direction? Or are you kind of like, it's out there and I'm hands off at that point?
I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. I think you feel as a human that you have a responsibility if you know something is wrong to point it out. And I think that's, in journalism, that's the same case as well. But if someone doesn't believe something, you can't make them believe that. No matter how many facts you present them or, situations that you've discussed, if someone truly doesn't want to believe something, then you can't make them. So, I think as a journalist, this is my job to put the facts out there and say, hey, this is what he said. This is what we fact-checked and found. And then a logical person draws the conclusion that they want to draw. As a person and someone who, genuinely feels bad for the people who are scammed by this, yeah, I would love to stand out there with a bright yellow sign and be like, don't do it. But at the same time, like, you have to allow people to make their own informed decisions.
Do you obviously had correspondence with Cerruti Brown? Did you talk to anyone else like Jonathan Jordan, Ethan Noroff, or anyone else for either of these stories?
Yeah, so I think the follow-up one, I did it with my NBA editor at the time, Adi Joseph.
Adi Joseph. Shout out Adi Joseph.
Yeah. So we co-wrote that story, and we kind of, he reached out to some of his NBA agents that he knows, and I reached out. Actually, a bunch of the people who were not implicated, but a bunch of the people who were caught up in it, whether it was like the people who designed the website or the people who were doing PR for them. And then Ethan, I definitely spoke to in one of the stories. And they reached out to me and they said, hey, we saw this, like, we don't know what's going on. Maybe you know more than I do. And I was like, I don't know that I do, but like, I'm happy to, if you guys want to talk on the record, like, I'm happy to let you guys tell your side of the story. And, they all came on and said we hadn't been paid, and, we were told that we would have jobs, and then it didn't work out. And I remember, I think it was Ethan, but I can't remember exactly. But it's in one of the stories. He was like, "Yeah, I would have been happy with just like a $10 Starbucks gift card right now." I mean, they hadn't gotten paid for months worth of work, and I just can't imagine what that feels like.
And what was the fallout thereafter? I mean, did you keep in touch, or was this sort of it? I'm looking at your article now between with you and Adi. This is this question I want to ask. You mentioned you had this infamous tweet that I remember about Cerruti Brown and what name he used to sign for those contracts, and if it would be felony forgery, basically. Did you ever hear from anyone, whether it's agents or players, that said what name he signed with?
No, and I think part of that might be that contracts were never signed.
Sure.
And I think. Again, I don't specifically know or remember, but that was the biggest thing for us when we were kind of looking into that story. It's like, okay, this is now, a felony charge. Like, if he uses a fake name and signs a contract, like, that's forgery. So that was a big point. And I just think at the time, like, Adi and I, we were a small workshop at the time. Like, it's just the two of us, and we're both covering national beats. So we just really didn't have the manpower to investigate that at a level of attention that we would like to give that. So I think the hope there was kind of just like, hey, if we point this out, it's an avenue for other people to explore who have more time and resources than we do.
And what was your thought process, or actually what was your opinion when you saw the AmeriLeague website changed to with Glendon Alexander's name and saying Cerruti Brown is a con artist? That whole, I mean, I've never seen a site usurp itself like that in the way I think it's Alexander Che was his name.
Yeah.
Who kind of took the helm of the ship and said, I'm going to do this my way. What was your reaction when you saw the website change? It's pretty fascinating.
I actually laughed. I was like, good for him. I mean, when you enter into some kind of contract or a verbal agreement like that, you honestly hope that the other person holds up their end of the bargain. And I don't know whether he signed an actual contract to do the work for him, but I thought it was great, and props to him for doing that. It kind of takes balls, and I think after the story went out, there was like a lot of classic like scrambling. Like immediately things were taken down from the website. Like we were watching all of this go down in real time. So like things were taken down from the website. That YouTube video that was up was the only thing, and then all of a sudden there's this countdown, this ambiguous countdown to nobody knew what. Like it was just counting down to something, but there was no text or anything like explaining what it was counting down to. And then all of a sudden things started disappearing, and then people were hard to reach, and so it was classic like behind the scenes scrambling.
I'm looking at it right now, and it's literally a screen cap from like a Google web search, and it has Cerruti. It says Cerruti Brown is Glendon Alexander. Yeah, you should Google Glendon Alexander. He is a con artist. And then below that is a Google search of Glendon Alexander stories, linking him to previous scams and transgressions. And there's a top. They changed the tab. I love the fact that you went to the trouble of changing the tab up top, where you find news, teams and status, all that. There's a tab specifically dedicated to Cerruti Brown is Glendon Alexander. So they deep dive on that. Well, I know. Well, Cammie, thank you for joining us. Is there anything else that I might have missed that is important to share as far as the story? Or rather, I guess if you had anything to say to Cerruti Brown or Glendon Alexander, what would that be?
I mean, thanks for making my life interesting for a couple of weeks. No, but seriously, like those are the types of stories that I really love to do because, in some ways it's a little bit of a public service, and you feel like you're doing something that's making the world a little bit better. But it's also interesting to go back for me. Like I watch a lot of like true crime documentaries and stuff, and I was a criminal justice major in college, so going through that whole process and looking at the way the tracks that people leave behind and figuring out, how do I look up and see if a business is registered as an LLC and what are the implications of that? Like it's such a tangled web, and to watch someone try and work through that in real time and know that they're about to be caught is a very, very interesting thing to be a part of. And I thought, it was a good test of my journalism skills, but more importantly, it was something that I think helped to shed a lot of light on something that, maybe he would have gotten away with. We just don't know.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, well, the cards were about to fall anyway. He didn't have the money, obviously, to pay these players. So his demise was inevitable. We just kind of shined the light on it maybe sooner than later, so to speak. So,
yeah,
Cammie,
that's very true.
Yeah, Cammie, thanks for joining us. Best luck with you moving forward professionally, and thanks for taking time to share your perspective as well. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Bye.
Yep. Bye. All right. Cammie Mattioli, another perspective. It's so much fun doing this. I'm having a lot of fun. Thanks for watching. If you are tuned in, I'm gonna just kind of segue here into some of the reporting I did. And who is Marcus Bass? That's the question. So after Jonathan Jordan was gone, Cerruti Brown's not answering his phone call. So who reaches out to me? Marcus Bass, the so-called commissioner of the AmeriLeague. He was commissioner, I believe, after Ethan Noroff had stepped down. Jonathan Jordan's gone. Their PR people, Alexis Robinson, Aaron Simon, as well, were gone as well at this point. It's literally Marcus Bass in an office by himself, trying to hold the pieces together. So he calls me out of the blue after I start reporting on this. So I do my due diligence. Literally, I need to kind of preface this as well, because for those that don't know, this is not a full-time job for me, right? So I have I have a full-time job to take care of my family and things like that. So while I'm, working at my real job, I'm getting calls from Marcus Bass. I'm getting calls from agents asking what this is all about. So I literally have to take an extended lunch hour break, walk over to my Burger King that's there with my laptop, and sit down and talk to Marcus Bass for a good 30, 45 minutes. I think I was late coming back from my lunch because I wanted this info. So, who is Marcus Bass? If you search his name, pulls up a resume website listing previous occupations, including public relations coordinator for ProAmerica Bank and senior publicist for It Girl Publications. His LinkedIn profile is also minimal, with 0 connections. His Twitter profile mentions he is director of operations for the AmeriLeague. Let's see if we can pull it up here. There he is, Marcus Bass. Wonderful. Still in Las Vegas. Never left, apparently. There you go. That's the one that sent the text to me at 12:45 in the morning saying that what I'm doing was hurting people. So, let's keep that out there. So so he once wrote for Hoops Habit, a fan-sided, mostly on the subject of Los Angeles Clippers. Here's his fan-sided bio. And again, this is just, fragments of info. I'm trying to just create a profile on someone who has very minimal information as well. So he reached out to us to set the record straight. He called, left a voicemail. I called him back. We set this up. And he confirmed Jordan's resignation. He said he was just overwhelmed with agents and players saying this wasn't going to happen and how things were being handled last minute. I completely understand and support his decision. Well, he's gone, so you can't really complain about it. And he also said there hasn't been a ton of structure up to this point. Gee, I wonder why. And then, with him leaving, with Jordan leaving, Bass leaving, PR leaving, it's literally Marcus Bass. Marcus Bass and Cerruti Brown. If Cerruti Brown's even still in Vegas at this point. Quote, "It's getting a little overblown," Bass said of recent developments and whether the league's future was in doubt. "When people think of a professional basketball league, they envision a crystal palace with 20 or 30 employees. It's been Cerruti Brown, myself, and Jonathan Jordan. It's been 3 guys. Doesn't even mention Ethan Noroff, who had left at this point." This next quote might be my favorite, because it's not, I just gotta read it. This is one of my favorite quotes from this whole story. So I asked him, why is Cerruti Brown not taking these calls? It's him that's involved, him that's in charge, him that needs to kind of quell people from saying this is a valid venture. So why is he not, agents? He wasn't returning calls from agents or players or coaches. Nobody's getting calls back from him. So Bass stated it was simply not worth Brown's time. To be very direct, it's a bit below his grade, Bass said. There are certain things he needs to deal with and things he's not. Your supposed league's imploding, but you don't need to deal with that right now. What else are you trying to deal with? Limited information, including no draft info just 2 days prior to the league's event, has led to heavy skepticism from those in the basketball world, especially as questions arise, who is financially supporting this league? Bass provided clarity as to why investors have not been named. "We're a privately funded league with a primary investor, and he's waiting until the league is successful to attach his name to it. That's not how this works. That's not how nothing works at all in life." I mean, the perfect example would probably be Ice Cube's Big Three, right? Not equal, but rather Ice Cube came out and said, "Hey, I'm Ice Cube, and I'm going to do the Big Three, and this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to launch it. This is what we're going to do." He put his name out there. Whether it succeeded or not, he put his name out there. Imagine if Vince McMahon, or someone like Vince McMahon, wanted to create the XFL, but didn't put his name out there, right? You have to put your name out there. You would need to put your equity out there that you've developed in order to make this thing viable or appear viable. So you can't just hide in the shadows, so to speak. So to say that investors are not willing is already misleading, right? No one's going to give you a certain amount of money and attach their name to it with any sort of skepticism. That's how investments work. I don't know if you know that or not, but that's how investing works. It's a risk. It's always a risk. If no one took a risk, we wouldn't have investments to begin with. So that's so misleading right there, right? But I have to report it. I have to report what he says. I can't just really, I can continue to question it, but that's what he's saying, right? Did admit to their shortcomings. It's been poorly managed thus far. Skepticism can arise when things can't be handled in a certain manner. Moving forward, I'm intent on it being handled in a certain manner. What that manner is, well, the very next day they're done, right? They're gone. Agents who have spoken to D-League Digest are doing their homework before attempting to leave the AmeriLeague behind in fear the league might find their player in breach of contract. Bass said if anyone wants out of their contract, they will offer that to them. So he's saying, yeah, we'll let you out, no problem. But they're not going to lose anything, right? I asked him about the similar logos. And he still says the draft is going to happen. So again, Alexis Robinson was another PR person for him. And I asked him to clarify. Because we've been working with an internal PR person for the last month. That means it's him. Marcus Bass is the PR. And then there's also Nina Zvala and Alexis Robinson saying that they were not involved. They haven't involved press releases over the last month. We still have a relationship with them, but Bass was unable to clarify the exact relationship, stating that was to be determined by Brown. So, location of play games is almost complete according to Bass. Secured dates at the Cashman Center, but the lease isn't yet finalized. We're such in a tight crunch. When it's tightened up, we'll release everything. We're not going to put an unpolished product out there. Still believe in it. We're still getting offers to purchase teams. Originally thought of as an alternative place for young players to compete instead of college or overseas and earn money at the same time. Brown at one point reportedly offered as much as $2.5 million. Joe Connelly resigned from his position last night. So here's Harrison Wind reporting that. So Joe must have known at this point it wasn't going to work. I mean, just so much smoke from Marcus Bass at this point. And it's hard to believe. Either he's in denial or he's continuing. You know, he's... I can only assume he's in denial at this point. He wants it to work. But at what point do you decide to turn and realize that it's not going to happen? And then we come to the trifecta of these stories. This is the third and final edition from myself at D-League Digest. This was right after Aaron Simon and Jeff Goodman broke the story about Rudy Brown's identity being Glendon Alexander. And at one point, Jeff Goodman did text message Glendon Alexander, I believe a couple of weeks prior to this, it said in his story. And Rudy Brown Alexander denied that, said it wasn't him. That's not him. When he sent a picture of Glendon Alexander to himself, he said that couldn't be far from the truth. That's not me. Sorry. Ha ha ha. So some of them we're going to play in the D-League draft because the D-League draft is supposed to be held the week after. Some did that. I don't think this link still works. Let's find out. No. Website coming soon. Fair enough. Content production strategist. Production. Excuse me. Visitors, YouTube. She's currently a producer at Revolt TV. Well, there you go. Good for her. Glendon Alexander. Scams before, including Oklahoma. Who is Glendon Alexander? Well, he was arrested, I think, back in 2004 for convicted of 2002 of bank fraud and wire fraud stemming from a series of scams and con jobs. So 2002 to 2015, 13 years apart. He was also cashing scholarship checks from teammates. I think $15,000 or so. So he has this history of just illegitimate ventures, so to speak. There's also, I want to say in Ohio, I don't have it up here, but he was also involved in like an AAU team or high major team then. He scammed families out of money and food and opportunities, things like that. So I'm going to put it here. AmeriLeague founder tells employees he's actually someone else. I talked to him, asked him, and he admitted he was Glennon Alexander. Stepping away and tell staff there'll be new ownership. I was in shock. I'm just hoping that all the people who have worked on this project can land on their feet. And here's the mention of the, you should Google Glennon Alexander. He's a con artist. And then Jeff Goodman does the name search record. There's no record of a Nino Brown, Cerruti Nino Brown, anywhere whatsoever. Here it is. Brown cannot be reached for comment Wednesday, but Brown denied in a text message earlier this month he was Glennon Alexander. Very wrong. You're not the first person who has asked me that either, he wrote. So there's no database for it. Ethan Noroff, he's very mysterious, and it's by design. One of the things he emphasizes is no digital footprint, and that's extremely rare in 2015, as we've mentioned before. 2002, Alexander was charged with stealing $150,000 in cash and jewelry from former Major League Baseball player Derek Bell. So Derek Bell is implicated in the story now. Just FYI. Alexander admitted to writing checks totaling nearly $50,000 off the account of a Dallas area dentist and transferred more than $1.5 million from an adult entertainment industry executive's account into his own. That landed Alexander at Seagoville Federal Correction Facility Institution in Texas, where he was released on October 11th, 2005. Sad part of all this is there are guys who turn down jobs and are headed to Vegas right now. That's the part that bothers me. He's selling people dreams. That's exactly what Joe said in our interview today. January 2014, Alexander and 36 told More News, all my con days, that's in the past. So over a year later, he's getting back into it. And this is from Jeff Goodman, ESPN. 4 coaches on former NBA players Tree Rollins and Paul Mukeski and Martin Nesvik. Connelly told Outside the Lines that he resigned Monday after also fearing that Brown's identity was fraudulent. I got a tip, looked at the picture, and sent it to Brian Moore, Connelly said. Then I started looking into it. There was no record of a Cerruti Brown anywhere. It's a fictitious person. The sad part of all this is there are guys who turn down jobs headed in Vegas right now. Yep. Whew. What a story. What a story, to say the least. Here's a fun one here. I think we'll wrap up on this one here. This is from Bernie Lee, actually, for Hoops Hype. Those who don't know, Bernie Lee is the player agent for Jimmy Butler. Has played guys in the G League as well, or previously did. He wrote this on November 4th, so you're looking at like a week and a half after the fallout. Everyone knows who he is. Kind of chimed in with when he knew this wasn't a viable opportunity. And you see the AmeriLeague logos here. We had a very nice, pleasant conversation. I agreed with many of the points Mr. Brown was raising in reference to creating an alternative and offering a better paying option than the D-League or overseas for American players who are not in the NBA. If the most important question involved financing was in place, clearly the concept was a home run. After we had established the genius behind the concept, it was my turn to ask questions that I knew would tell me everything I needed to know. 1. How do you plan to market the league, and how are you going to make money? Answer. We're going to broadcast games online and try and raise interest to a point through fan attendance and engagement to entice sponsors and try to sell the league at some point. Fair enough. All right. So this is more of the underlying things we don't talk about. 2. What have you done to secure signage, balls, and uniforms? How are we going to make this look like a professionally run league as opposed to a bunch of recognizable players playing pickup basketball? The answer I received to this question let me know right away that the AmeriLeague would unfortunately never exist in real life. We haven't thought a lot about that yet, but I'm sure we'll figure something out. We haven't ordered uniforms or signage yet, but that should be the easiest part. All right. Bernie Lee says, from my experience working with the NBA, the D-League, and some of the best run foreign leagues I know the true genius and true beauty of competitions is in the fine details. For example, Whenever trades or signings happen in the NBA, what fans see is the end result. Player A was in City B, gets the call, and 24 hours later, said player is in uniform playing for the new team. The logistics behind these transactions is where the genius and the glue of the league actually exists. Last year I had a client in China, John Lucas III, whose season was coming to a close. At the very same time, the Pistons had a player sustain a season-ending injury, and it opened an opportunity for John in Detroit. All that remained was the really simple human element of getting a player located in Fushan, China, to Detroit, Michigan, ready to play basketball against the best players in the world. Oh, and the timeline to complete this task is 24 to 48 hours. Cue the scene in The Wizard of Oz where you're not supposed to look behind the curtain. John played a game on Saturday in Fushan, I'm saying that wrong probably, and was on the practice floor in Detroit Monday morning, cleared and contract signed in shoes that matched his team's uniform and wearing a uniform that actually fit and had his name and number. All that's done in a matter of days. Shoes, contract, uniform, all that stuff, done. I had another client years ago that signed with the Chicago Bulls while in Erie, Pennsylvania at 1 p.m. who needed to be in Chicago for a 7 p.m. game. What took place to get him there was nothing short of amazing. It included great moments in sports history, such as Randy Brown navigating Chicago traffic at 4 p.m. and making it from O'Hare to the United Center in under 50 minutes. The only task we didn't accomplish was my client's uniform, as he had to check into the game with the uniform with no name on the back. The consolation was the last Bulls player that ever had to do that was Michael Jordan, because someone had stolen his jersey. It's a good company to be in. So it's these things behind the scenes that we take for granted, that Bernie Lee observed and knew, that you can't just overlook. Hey, we'll just get uniforms. We'll just get signage. Balls, no problem. Those are the finer things that can tell you whether a league's going to be viable. So, interesting to say the least. Another look at the homepage right now. Yeah. Whew. Well, it's been about 90 minutes. So, thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. I've had a lot of fun, to say the least. It's been quite enjoyable. So, thank you to all those who took time to watch. It means a lot. And, again, follow me on Twitter at AdamJ_NBAGL, at 2ways10days as well. If you like what you saw today, feel free to give us a follow on Twitch. There's a little heart icon there. Give it a follow. I'll be live streaming throughout the G League season. Looks like they're back on Twitch now, so I'll be doing that as well. I can answer your questions during games while I'm calling the broadcast too. So thanks for watching. This was a lot of fun, and I'll see you next time.